Peace, family. We should be live right now. On here with Dr. Boyce Watkins, man. We're gonna get that financial work today, boy. We're gonna get that financial work today. Looking forward to today's show. Peace to the family out there. Dr. Boyce Watkins, welcome to the platform, my brother.
Oh, thank you for having me, brother. It's an honor to be here, man. I've heard great things about all the work you're doing, man, and it was a real honor to finally talk to you. I feel like it was long overdue, man.
Oh no, definitely long overdue. Definitely long overdue. We're actually in the middle of a financial revolution. The paradigm is completely changing in terms of how people view money, how they spend money, and how they just transaction with money is different because of cryptocurrency and everything. So it's very important times that we are in. Our people can really position themselves the right way to be in a position of power, and that's the reason why we have brothers out there like you teaching our community about things that we normally wouldn't know about. So we're gonna get into all of that and more, family. But before we start, I gotta give a shout out to a couple of black businesses out there. Well, mainly my brother King Simon. He's the best when it comes to numerology. Text him your full name and date of birth, 347-496-1022, and that brother will get back to you. He also has courses on udemy.com, an introductory course, and that course will introduce you to a full 8-hour course that he has available. Also, you guys need to check out blackmagicuniversity.com. A lot of those esoteric and financial workshops that I put together last year are now available on blackmagicuniversity.com. And without further ado, back to my brother, Dr. Boyce Watkins. Well, let the people know who you are before we get started, because you have an interesting past. So let the people know exactly who you are. I know you worked at a university before and everything, and you left or something. So, tell us about that, Doc.
Well, I'm the son of Larry and Robin Watkins, and I'm married to a beautiful black woman named Dr. Alicia Watkins,
Mm.
and I've had the honor of being a father and a husband and a black man, and I believe deeply in black strength, black pride, black unity, black success, all these things. I also consider people like Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Louis Farrakhan, etc., to be among my greatest heroes of all time. And I believe that that black people are special and extraordinary in every way, and I think we should carry ourselves accordingly. I also get a chance to lead something called the Black Business School. We serve about 150,000 students around the world. And the goal that I had was to use my financial background I was on the faculty at Syracuse University, my doctorate's in finance. And I felt that if we did it right, we could make our people the most financially intelligent people on the planet, and really reclaim the greatness that we always had. So that's my mission. That's what I do. And then the rest is just fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm. I know you deal a lot with the stock market, and that's kind of intimidating to a lot of black people. Is it just the vocabulary that you would say is intimidated? Is it easy? Is it hard? Like, how would you describe the stock market and being involved in it?
Well, you can think of it a little bit like golf. They say golf is an easy game to learn, but it's a hard game to master.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, some would say you can't really master it. Even when you think you've mastered it, you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Stock market's kind of like that too. What makes it appear confusing is that people that talk about it, they've shaped it in kind of an elitist framework where if I am a financial expert and I'm trying to impress you, I'm going to use a bunch of fancy words to confuse you.
Right,
To remind you that I'm smarter than you, right?
Yeah.
And I guess I understand some of that, but the benefit of having the background that I have, because I've trained financial experts, I've trained people who've gone to Wall Street and made a lot of money and stuff, is that what happens is that when you go through all the theory and all the math behind all of this, you find that it's actually quite simple. That it's one of those things where you can shave away all the complexities and focus on a couple of basic issues that will keep you focused. So first thing I will say to anybody listening is the biggest mistake you can make when it comes to stock market investing is to not participate at all. That's the only major mistake you can make is when you just don't get involved. And I'll talk more about that later. But basically, it's almost like think of wealth like driving down a road. They talk about things like investment vehicles, and everybody's got a vehicle. Well, wealthy people, they have jet airplanes. They're going really fast, and then maybe some of us have have a school bus or a 10-speed bike, right? But so imagine if you're competing with all these people that have different cars and different vehicles, and you're on foot. Well, when you're not investing, that's what you are. You're on foot. So imagine somebody on foot who says, I'm not going to invest. I'm just going to, work hard and make my money, and I can still keep up in the race. That's almost like a sprinter saying, I can keep up with your car because I'm a fast sprinter. Or even if the person has a raggedy car, the fastest man on earth, Usain Bolt, cannot keep up with a Toyota Corolla, right? So the point is that when you talk about things like inflation eats away at the value of your money. So your money has to grow at a rate that's faster than inflation, just and because the American worker is really losing. So long story short, man, I would encourage anybody, and maybe by the time we're done, I can hopefully persuade people to consider approaching it with a very basic, simple strategy that will make a tremendous amount of difference in your life.
Indeed. So I want to focus a lot tonight because I know you do your talks with Dr. Claude Anderson, and I want to talk about integration. I've heard so much about how the civil rights movement and Jackie Robinson, and we first integrated into baseball, and we integrated this, integrated into that. But a lot of people in the grassroots, you won't hear this narrative on mainstream media, but a lot of people in the grassroots continuously talk about how integration hurt Black people. In terms of us integrating into white society, what do you think? What was the main thing that selling point that they had? Was it just us being next to them? What was so appealing about us integrating with them, you think?
Well, in my view, America is a country that was built on the basic idea that white people are better than everybody else. And, and unfortunately, if you're not taught any different, that's what you're going to grow up and believe. So you believe that your goal as a Black man is to get the higher authority to accept you, right? Just like if I'm trying to get a good grade, I want to impress the teacher, right? Or I want to get approval from my parents, things like that. So to some extent, I think America positioned white people as our parents. So we thought mistakenly that getting closer to him, being in his neighborhoods, working for his companies, etc., that false validation was going to make us more worthy when we were always worthy in the first place. And so remember, with integration, Brother Rich, it's like if I say to you, hey man, let's get together. There's a difference between us getting together at your house versus us getting together in my house. Right. So if I say, let's integrate our families, move on in the house, I'll let you stay in the basement. You're not, we're friends, we're cool. Like you're never going to get the same power in my house that you have in your house. Right. So when somebody says okay, let's integrate, the first question you should ask is, whose home court are we playing on? Are we going to your house or are we going to my house? That makes a big difference. And so the problem with integration is not that integration is a terrible idea. I personally think the world should all connect. We should all connect with each other and learn from each other. But we completely dismantled ourselves and gave away all of our power by saying, okay, we'll integrate your house. What you want us to do, boss? Just let us come stay at your house. And that's what made integration bad. Now pay attention now. Here's the deal. Look, let's talk about another type of integration. My goddaughter married a very nice white boy from Denmark, right? I would have chosen a Black man for her, but she chooses who she wants to be with, and I don't care what other people do with their lives, right? I don't judge that. Right. But here's the thing. He wanted to integrate into our family. So in order for him to integrate into our family, as the patriarch of the family, we set the ground rules, right? They had a baby. It's like, no, you're raising our Black child. Right, not our white child, not our mixed child. That's a Black boy. Right. When you're in our space, you follow our rules. If you don't do that, if you disrespect the space on any level, we're going to reject you. He was completely in alignment with that. So in that particular case, the integration works out fine for us. He's a nice guy. He's got whatever. So my point is to say that I think it's not that integration's bad. It's that when it comes to Black people, if you look at all the data that measure quality of life for Black people, since integration, it has gone down. If you look at our family structure, It's gone down since integration because we're picking up all these weird cultures from other people. If you
Mm-hmm.
look at our economic situation, Black wealth has consistently declined since integration. If you look at education, our children are not better educated now than they were before 1968. So integration did not work for us. And you don't have to be anti-white or anything to acknowledge that we should have been the ones in the driver's seat from the very beginning, in which case it would have gone differently.
Would you consider someone like Jackie Robinson? Would you consider him a sellout?
You know what? I would not. If somebody used those terms, I wouldn't say you're wrong. I think that he was probably. I feel like he was misinformed. I think that he firmly believed that, like many people believe, that him going to the major leagues was doing a favor for Black people. A lot of people cheered on Jackie Robinson, right? So I think that for us to judge something that happened, 70 years ago or 80 years ago, it would be kind of tough to do that, right? But if you look at it, directly and objectively, what did Jackie Robinson really gain for the community? I mean, it's a learning point, right? Okay, you got one Black man in the major leagues, but then you destroyed an entire industry, an entire sports league. You didn't just own it. Now think about it. 70 years later, you got wealthy Black people begging for a chance to own a fraction of an NFL team. Yeah. But you own the whole damn sports league. Yeah. Right? And you threw all that away so one guy could get a job? That don't make no sense. So Jackie didn't strengthen the community. He didn't even strengthen himself. He took himself away from his power base. He took himself away from the best athletes in the world. And also his community suffered because that's what integration tended to do. It tended to cherry pick Negroes. They'll grab certain Black folks and say, we'll take him and him and him, but we ain't taking the rest of y'all. Whereas Malcolm had it right, because Malcolm basically said, if you can't accept all of us, then you can't have any of us. You can't just take me and leave everybody else behind. You have to accept everybody.
Right. Indeed. Well, one of the things that destroyed our community so horrible in the 80s was the crack epidemic. Do you think that still happens if we never integrated the whole crack epidemic? Does that still happen? Do you think?
Man,
I don't know if it happens.
We would have had a greater ability to resist it, I think, without integration. Yeah, because one thing Dr. Claude Anderson talks about is that we used to have Black communities. Now we just have Black neighborhoods. And when you have a community, you have the ability to identify threats to that community and to say, we're not letting that's not happening in our neighborhood. A lot of communities around the country have homeowners associations and stuff like that. And they get together at town hall meetings and they argue over the direction of the community. And this is something that I don't think many of our Black neighborhoods really have the power or foresight to necessarily do all the time. And so ultimately, I think when you talk about the crack era and the damage that was done, I look at what people must have been thinking at that time. I mean, crack just sort of snuck up on us so bad. I mean, I think people just thought, okay, this is a new drug. I'm going to try it out. It's not a big deal. And it should almost be alarming to us, because it should make you understand that, look, they could be sneaking something else in your community right now that you think is harmless. You don't think is a big deal. And next thing you know, 40, 50 years later, there's a whole narrative around the fact that you jumped into this thing that you didn't know how serious it was. So I think that healthy distrust that people have, like, for example, when you talk about things going on right now with Dr. Fauci and all that stuff, that healthy distrust that's smart and that's protective. That at least means that you're thinking for yourself. And so the crack era, I don't know what could have stopped that, man. But integration probably did not help.
Indeed. Now you're big on Black love, Dr. Boyce, and shout out to your wife, Alicia. Is that?
Yeah. And by the way, she told me to tell you hi. She's a fan of your show, man.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the talks that y'all give, and you also had the documentary Black Love. Now, the father being taken out of the household. What's your thoughts on how that went down with the welfare system? Because we're left and we're just pointing fingers at each other. In terms of the Black man not being home like the rest of every other community, their father's usually in the household. But everybody I grew up around didn't have a father. Everybody I grew when I was young, it was just that's why it didn't bother me that much because it was me and a group of other dudes, and none of us had dads, so we was just like we thought that's how life was supposed to be. What is it going to take to get the black man back in the home, in integration, in this system, not in a Wakanda type system where everything's perfect, but in this system, we know all the obstacles we have. How do we get them back in the house despite the obstacles, despite child support, despite all of that going on, Dr. Boyce Watkins?
It's going to require us to educate ourselves on what we need to know to be successful Black people in this country and around the world. If you send your kid to school every day, they're not learning the things they need to know. They're going to learn, they're going to learn their math and their science and all that, but then they're also going to learn a lot of cultural norms that are more reflective of European thinking, right? They're going to come home saying, well, you're not using the right pronouns and LGBT this and all this other stuff, right? So you got to remember, the education system isn't just education, it's really indoctrination. And that's the reason the educational system is so dangerous, because the educational system trains us to become white supremacists in a lot of ways we don't even recognize. So what I really would argue is that any family that wants their children to be on a different track has to understand the importance of being very intentional about taking over the educational process of your children. We talk about consciousness and what it means to be woke and aware. One aspect of that is just knowing what's going on and taking the time to think through every choice you make. Don't do things on autopilot. Don't just automatically say, I'm gonna send my kid over here and then put them on this path because that's what everybody else is doing. You do that, you'll destroy yourself, because the system is designed to destroy us. It's not designed to make us powerful or to prosper. It's designed to use us, right? And commodify us. So I would argue that if you're talking about just the importance and the power of legacy and family and how it's linked to wealth and power and everything else, why shouldn't that be as important to teach your child as math, science, and English? That should damn near be a class in my house. Look, you're talking to your son. Look, this is what a father does. This is what a Black man does. The Black man, and just basic codes. If you have a child, you do not abandon your child. You value your body. Don't go planting your seed in any old woman that you meet on the street, because that can have consequences. Thinking about being strategic, learning things like chess and mathematics. So, because the Black man has to be very strategic. You got to think about every single step that you're making, every step your enemies are making. Because if you don't, they're going to take you out. Something bad's going to happen to you. And then you talk. Of course, you work with women in terms of how to deal with men. I think that relationship piece is literally, in my view, the most important objective of the Black community in this generation and beyond. The ability for Black men and Black women to find some way to come together, stay together, and work it out and figure it out. That's absolutely critical, because there's so many consequences when you have children that are not guided by a strong male figure. If you have when you have boys that don't have a man they can look at and copy, it becomes confusing for him, because then they know he's turning on TV and he's copying some rapper, right? He's or some dope dealer, somebody, whoever just happens to cross his path, right? Sometimes you luck out. Sometimes another man really steps in that role, but that role is supposed to be filled by the biological father. Like, period. Like that. There's nobody that will protect the child more than its biological father, right? And the same thing. You talk about these poor little girls, look at the rise in R. Kelly type incidents happening in households, molestations and stuff like that. That's linked to the fact that, look, let me say it like this. I lucked out. My biological father went to prison. He wasn't around. I didn't know the man very well. But when I was 3, my mother married another man who took me in as his own, and he raised me as his own. There is no way on earth anybody could have got into that house and touched my sister with my father in that house. He would have got a bullet straight in his head, right? So that little layer of protection is very important for a family. So I personally think that we have to define what we believe to be an appropriate family construct. I think that has to be promoted and celebrated. I think we have to challenge the culture that leads us to believe it's appropriate to disrespect women. Women, I mean, my God, these women gave birth to you. How in the hell are you going to disrespect the people that literally gave you life? That's insanity to me. And I think that there's a lot of healing that has to happen, because a lot of this is linked to trauma. Most of us score very high on the trauma scores. There's something called an ACEs test my wife told me about that you could take. Is it ACEs, ACES? Yeah, ACEs. and it'll give you a trauma score. And if your score is high, that probably means you need some therapy, because what happens is that when you've been heavily traumatized as a child, it's difficult for you to develop the tools necessary to seek out and maintain healthy relationships. You get triggered, you run away, you want to fight, all this other stuff. Right. You have to know how to work out and resolve relationships. And that is an important power play to make, because the more healthy relationships you have, the more successful you're likely to be and the happier you're likely to be.
Indeed. What's your thoughts on like the online dating, all of these apps and websites as far as online dating?
Well, I think on one hand they can be beneficial, because they can allow you access to options you might not have otherwise. If you're not a person who wants to go out and meet somebody in the club, then a good dating app is cool, because you can meet people, at home and not have to run around in the streets. The problem is, number one, people can pretend to be anybody online. Right? There's that whole Netflix documentary about that guy that was systematically milking women for their money. I forgot, what was it called? The Tinder swindler. Yeah, so you have some of that, right? Also, what has to occur, I think, if you're messing with the apps, I think you got to think about what your goal is, right? So sometimes our goal is, look, I just want to meet somebody to have some fun with for a short period of time. Sometimes you say, look, I want to meet the person I'm gonna be with for the rest of my life. I'm not here to judge that, but I think there has to be an alignment in the objectives. Right. Because I think a lot of times you might identify somebody and you're thinking, okay, I met the one, but they're like, no, you're just number one out of 20. Right. And that can create a lot of confusion, a lot of disappointment, things like that. But I think the good outweighs the bad, but there's a lot of unhealthy, very almost frightening things that occur with some of these apps, especially when you're talking about women. So I would almost say to people, look, it's generally like anything else. Remember, my thing is investing. I'm all about investing. But the thing about investing, people should understand, is that most of your most important investments are not money. It has nothing to do with money. The things you invest that are really most important are things that are more valuable than money, like investing your mental and physical health, right? You invest in the wrong people. The wrong people can destroy you psychologically, physically, give you diseases, things like that. You're investing your time, you're investing your love, you're investing all these other things and more. So one of the rules about investing is that before you make an investment, you take the time to vet the investment. If I'm going to go buy a business, I'm going to look it over. I'm going to ask people about it. I'm going to get some outside opinions. I'm going to analyze the books for a while. I'm really going to think it through, right? I'm not just going to dive right in, right? But the thing is that when it comes to relationships, I think sex kind of tricks us. Sex just makes us instantly connect to people. And sometimes those people spiritually are not the right people to have in your space. I mean, if you ever really want to ruin your life, just go ahead and have a really, really fucked up relationship. Like that'll destroy you. That will just mess you up. So I would encourage everybody, look, if you're trying to make good moves in your life and you're trying to find your happiness, your bliss, your success, whatever it is, value yourself enough to be really thoughtful about who you allow into your space on any level. And I'll say this, then I'll stop talking about this. But as I became more public and I was around more people and stuff like that, but I had to gain a really heightened awareness of who was around me on any level, who I even took in as a friend. And that was important, because you let the wrong people in your circle, it can just create all kinds of chaos.
Yeah, it could throw things completely off. Yeah. Big time. I want to ask you, so let's talk a little bit about Black businesses. So if I'm a Black business owner, let's say I have a store, a grocery store, whatever, do you see anything wrong with me hiring Mexican workers, like have some Mexican workers because it's cheap labor? Is that still, Black business, Black, is that still Black power? Is that what we're talking about? Is that, because some people say that's being smart? Is there anything wrong with that to you?
Well, I think every situation varies, right? But remember, I don't think that we have to think about Black business as us living in a vacuum. You can't participate and prosper in the global economy by being on an island. That's what North Korea does, and North Koreans are starving to death. You want to connect with the world. You just have to make sure that you negotiate the terms of that connection. So if I hire a white guy or a Mexican and I'm the boss and my family owns the business and we get the bulk of the equity, who's winning in that relationship? right? Think about it. They love hiring black people, right? But that
Yeah,
ain't
yeah,
because it's good for us. It's because
yeah.
it's good for them, right?
Mm,
So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the question that every entrepreneur or any person with resources has to ask is, how can I specifically point to the areas where my community is benefiting from what I'm doing? And how can I point to areas where the benefit goes beyond just me and my bank account? Right. If I get a great job somewhere making a bunch of money and I'm living in a white neighborhood or whatever, driving a nice car, me and my family are doing well. That's nice, but that's not a community wide benefit. A better layout might be something where I take the skills that I have and I put myself in a position to be a business owner or investor where I'm able to multiply those benefits, where I'm investing in other people. Maybe I'm training other people. Maybe other people in my community are working for me or working with me, right?
mm,
So I personally think that it doesn't have to be a purity exercise, right? I think it's a waste of time for us to get into anything that involves just blanket exclusion of anyone else. I'm just not. I ain't got time for that. I'm not interested in sitting around thinking about how mad I am at white people.
mm,
If you really feel powerful and you really feel that what you're doing is worthwhile, you're not really gonna spend time obsessing over what he's got and what he's doing and everything else. You're gonna focus on what you're doing. So every
mm,
day in my life, Brother Rich, I work with black people every day. I got a
mm,
black wife, we got black kids, we doing black stuff.
mm,
And our whole world is pretty much just us. I could go a whole month without seeing a white man. So I'm
mm,
not really even thinking about it that way. So if I hire a white guy to do a job, like if I need a plumber and the best plumber in the area happens to be white, yeah, I'll pay the plumber. He'll come to my house and fix what he needs, and then he goes home, and it's done. So
mm,
I don't really think. I think the problem for black people when it comes to dealing with white folks is when you work for them,
mm,
because they have a history of abusing you. There's a cultural divide where you come in with a certain way of viewing the world, and then they have their own way of viewing the world, and in some cases they can become a little self-righteous to the point where they want to convince you that something's wrong with you because you see the world the way you see the world. And next thing you know, it just doesn't work out, and it causes a lot of mental and physical health effects. Literally, especially for the black man, uh, I don't believe most black men, definitely no strong black man should ever be entirely economically dependent on a white man. It's not natural. It's not
mm,
natural because it does something to you spiritually that ends up killing you. That's why black men have the shortest lifespan, in my opinion. Actually, they did a Harvard study. They said just the stress of black men going to work, especially
mm,
straight black men,
mm,
going to work, working for their oppressor every day, literally kills us. So it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you if you're working at UPS or you got a job at Chipotle or something. I'm not saying that. What I am
mm,
saying though is at the very least you want to position yourself where you've got options, right?
mm,
So if I've got that job at UPS, but I'm investing, I got some hustles over here. Maybe I got a side hustle business over there. Maybe I got some stock investments over here. Maybe I'm getting into some real estate, right? At least I have some windows out the door in case the house starts to burn down. Because the worst form of stress you can ever feel is to feel trapped. So
mm.
that would be probably the best advice I would give anybody is look at your life and say, what areas am I trapped and how do I make sure I create enough options for myself so that when I do something, I'm doing it because I want to do it, not because I have to do it. There's a very big difference.
Mhm. Indeed. What's your thoughts? Are you a fan of HSBCUs? Are you a fan of the? Or
You know what? I think HBCUs are like, HBCUs do more good than harm, right?
mm,
I feel like with HBCUs, sometimes you get a little frustrated because you feel like there's more that could be done, and
mm,
um and it is kind of a mindset that's a little bit different from my own. Like so, for example, Howard University has been down the street from Dr. Claude Anderson for 40 years and has never ever invited him to come
mm,
speak. But they've had dozens, hundreds of mediocre white people but
mhm,
having literally have one of the greatest black economic thinkers, the modern Marcus Garvey, right down the street, and they don't even
mm,
want to talk to him, right? That right there is the kind of thing that frustrates the hell out of me. At
mm,
the same time, HBCUs, I have a lot of people from HBCUs that really have embraced the ideas and the messages that we share. And it's almost like it's like if you are feeding people a type of truth and a type of power that they've never seen before, you don't have to sell it to them. You don't have to convince them
mm,
that freedom is better. You don't have to convince them that you're better off when you have wealth and all these other things. And so they become very supportive in that way. I feel like I
Mm.
have a good relationship with a lot of the HBCU alums that are cool with what we do. So I'm not really here to bash them, but I will say that I would leave it up to the HBCU alums because I feel like they're in a special space, right? You know, that's their space. I never went to an HBCU. I applied to teach at one when I was at Syracuse. It just didn't work out. Believe it or not, man, when I went to, again, another thing that frustrates me, when I interviewed at Howard, I got interviewed by a Chinese man. And I remember sitting there thinking, why is this Chinese guy who's the head of the department, why is this Chinese man deciding if I'm qualified to teach black people? Can I go to China and find an African American or a black man that is deciding if a Chinese man should be qualified to teach Chinese students? No, China would never allow that, right? So that was a reflection of the oppression. But, you know, I think that in general, HBCU alums, I would encourage them to really start challenging their institutions to do better. You know, in fact, just today I spoke at Clark Atlanta University online, but the reason I spoke to them was because, you know, I could tell the instructor felt that HBCUs are lagging and kind of missing out. They're not able to really survive. They don't have a lot of independent economic strength because they hold on to these old Negro traditions that just don't make no damn sense in the 21st century, right? So my argument would be, they're not harming anybody. They're not really, it's not as if they're coming and attacking people like us. They're just not doing as much as they can. So perhaps if they are exposed to better ideas, then over time you'll have some people that can go bust down that bureaucracy. The number one killer of the HBCUs, in my opinion, is a lack of economic independence, and the bureaucracy is just ridiculous.
Wow. What would you say now? You worked at Syracuse University, right?
Yep.
So what and during your experience working at Syracuse University, what did you dislike? Like, what was the one thing that you disliked the most out of having a job? Because after that, that's when you went off and you started your Black business school, right? Okay, so kind of compare and contrast the two from you creating a Black business school versus you working at Syracuse University.
My frustration with working at Syracuse was that I was never really cut out to work for anybody, to be honest. I didn't fit in. There was nobody around that was like me. Before I came in there, man, we were like the Little Rock Nine. You know, they hired. What happened was they had 90 professors, or 80 or 90 professors in the whole business school. None of them were black. Not one black person. Wow. So they forced them to hire 3 of us, because they literally said, you know, the central administration said, we'll pay half the salary if you will hire 3 black people. So they were like, okay, well, we'll take it. It's like getting free professors in your department, right? So they hired us very reluctantly. And so I'm thrown in this space, and I didn't have anybody in my family that had ever gotten a PhD or served at a university. I didn't know what professors were supposed to do. So I get invited to all these damn wine and cheese parties and stuff like that. And that wasn't something I could really relate to. So I just kind of kept to myself, and I've never been afraid of being independent. So I just said, okay, well, I'll figure it out, because money was good, and the frustration came with the fact that I looked around, right, and it cost like I think $60,000 a year to go to Syracuse at the time. So the black students I ran into were either really rich or they were in debt for the rest of their life. They can never repay the debt. So I knew I wasn't making an impact. I said, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be one of the most successful black people out here because I have all this education, but I don't feel successful. I don't feel like what I'm doing is having an impact on my community. And so I remember noticing, I said, okay, so the internet's out here. If I can create a platform, which we eventually did, and then I could reach people all around the world and reach them at a lower cost than what it would cost them to go to college. So that's where the Black business school concept came from, was the ability to educate lots and lots of people in a mass scale at a very low cost. And that's important when you talk about fighting in a war. You see, when you fight a war, which this is what it is, the racism and all that, that's a war in my view. In a war, you don't need 1 or 2 super soldiers. You know, like we tend to have this really bad model of black leadership where we have one guy and he becomes the guy and everybody's looking at the guy to solve all the problems. It's like, no, we're all leaders. We're all winners on some level. We can all contribute, right? So in my view, it was like, okay, I'm not trying to go mentor 2 or 3 people. I want to mentor 100,000 people, right? My vision is like, if we can produce, say, 500,000 young black kids in this generation that are trained on the fundamentals of wealth and investing in economics, they're going to murder the game in the next generation. Like that, this is going to have a massive multi-trillion-dollar impact on our community. And I thought about this because I watch a lot of documentaries about war. You know, there's this World War II documentary that I've just been obsessed with. I watched it probably 4 or 5 times because I was always trying to. War teaches me a lot about, first of all, just how evil and terrible human beings could be toward one another, especially Europeans. You know, like I'm sitting there watching, I'm fascinated. I'm like, wow, these are white people like murdering other white people like by the thousands and don't give a damn. You know, like ain't nobody gonna feel sorry. So you can go marching and singing "We Shall Overcome" and "Kumbaya" and all that. Yeah, that will get your ass kicked. Like like that. Nobody cares. Like so, you know, when you run the street talking about Black Lives Matter and all that, nobody cares. All you're doing is you're empowering your enemy. So that's one thing I noticed was just how like if you can't defend yourself, then you will suffer. Period. The second thing I learned from it was I learned that there's I called my 4 eyes of how you win a war. And in that war, the 4 eyes were information, innovation, and infinite industrialization. Those were the 4 eyes I came up with. I said, because with information, the ability to crack the German codes was critical in in Americans' ability to win the war. If they could not figure out what the Germans were saying back and forth to each other, they wouldn't be able to find the U-boats. The U-boats would have kept shooting down their ships. Innovation, the invention of things like radar, the ability to know when the German planes were coming from far away. Like they had these scientists working like it was life or death. They had to figure out like, okay, how are we gonna make this thing work, right? Because if we don't, we're gonna die. And then infinite industrialization came into play when I noticed that the United States won the war not because they had better weapons than the Germans. The Germans had the first jet airplanes, they had the best submarines, they had the best tanks, they had the best everything. They even had the first rockets. You know, that's how NASA came to be, right? Because they got all the German scientists that got us to the moon, right? So, but the United States, what they were able to do was they just had this ability to mass produce. So they you know, for every one plane the Germans made, we'd make like 100. For every bullet they made, we'd make 1,000. You know, so we were able to mass produce it. So I said, what we got to do as a community, in my view, is first of all, knowledge is power. That's where the information piece comes into play. Every black man, black woman's got to be picking up books. You got to, you know, I mean, that's just critical, right? Innovation, right? Creativity. That means you find a different way to skin the cat, right? You can't sort of live within the pre-existing paradigms and systems that were given to you. Think outside the box, right? Be innovative, right? If you can innovate faster than the competitor, then you're going to win. And then infinite industrialization means that when I think about the gifts I have, right, the things I was blessed with, I don't want my gifts to die with me. I want to mass produce. Like anybody who thinks anything that I say resonates with them, I want to produce like 400,000 Boyce Watkinses so that if I die, they can't kill the whole movement. They can't.
Right. No, definitely.
Copied, right?
Yeah,
so by doing that, that's how you win a war. And I'm firmly convinced that we have enough people that get it. I'm not really worried about some of our folks that are still lost. I know that's going to happen. So maybe it'll take a generation or whatever. But I think that the people in our community that are at the forefront, that are the thinkers and the leaders and everything else, I think we've got enough of that happening now that we won't be able to be stopped. They will never be able to stop us, period.
How much do you think the Black church or Christianity contributed to us integrating into white society?
Well, you know, well, first of all, our religion was stolen from us when we came from Africa, so we never knew what our real religion was. Right? So they made us all Christians, and then they started taking stuff out the Bible that didn't fit a slave narrative. And next thing you know, we became super slaves. And that's what religion did, right? It just taught us all the wrong things, turn the other cheek, and all this other crap, right? Now that does not mean, in my view, that the entire Black church is garbage and worthless. I don't believe that at all. I see a lot of people in the church that get it. That have taken on the revolutionary Jesus and not the other stuff that they were taught. I think that to some extent it's going to still require some work to overcome that brainwashing, because we are brainwashed in that area. But I believe that the church ultimately over time as it wakes up, as it continues to wake up, some churches are super ready. Some churches are already going at it. I think that what the church is going to do is take its natural role as one of the great last institutions that exists within our community. Remember when they integrated us, they kind of deinstitutionalized us. They took away our businesses, they killed our families, right? But the church kind of still resonated and maintained itself
Yeah,
through that time.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't want to throw away the churches. Like I don't think our community would be better if everybody just stopped going to church. Now I'm not gonna lie, I don't go to church at all. I'm spiritual and everything, but church is not my thing. But I see strength and conviction coming from some of my friends in the church that that allows them to at least stand on their rock. I think what happens, man, is that if you're talking about a world where everybody wants to water you down and convince you to fit in, if you don't really know who you are, like if nobody told you who you are from the beginning, then you're going to kind of go along like whatever. You're going to be like a leaf blown in the wind. The wind blows east, you go east. The wind blows west, you go west. And you see a lot of that. I call them the
Right.
flimsy Negroes. You see the flimsy Negroes on TV.
Mhm.
I'm on CNN, and because I want white people to put me on CNN, I'm gonna talk about whatever they want me to talk about. So if they talk about immigration, I'm gonna talk about immigration. If they talking about kids being separated at the border, I'm gonna talk whatever crap, LGBT, I'm gonna talk about that, right? But then you've got just solid people in the community, right? Like for example, I don't know much about your background, but I don't have to be told that somebody told you who you were long ago that allowed you to be different and be successful the way that you are, right? So ultimately, what I tend to notice is that the people that I can work with the most tend to be people, not so much people that I agree with on everything, but just people that are solid and clear about what they represent, and don't really care what the rest of the world is doing, like my dad's actually a pastor, and and it doesn't matter if the world is doing stupid TikTok dances and all this other shit that he's doing. Like he doesn't care. He's like, this is who I am. This is what I think, and that's how we were raised. It was like, I don't care what they're doing down the street. This is how things are going to go in this house, and that level of conviction is very important because you're going to get a lot of pressure and propaganda thrust upon you, just like what we're going through during this pandemic. So I think a lot of my church people are good. Some of them you got to work with, but you got a lot of positivity there.
What's your thoughts? I've heard you talk about this. Maybe you could elaborate on this some more. Immigration impact on the so-called African American community, whether it's employment or whatever it is.
If you read Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson of Powernomics, he explains pretty clearly how the immigration policies have been designed to be very harmful to Black people. Immigration itself is not a bad thing, but if you look at the history of immigration, how they did it, they would have quotas. And the darker you were on the spectrum, the fewer of those people they were bringing to the country. Because there was a time where Black people were more than a third of the country, almost half in a lot of parts of the country. And they said, okay, we're surrounded by too many Black people. We don't want this. So basically, the way the immigration quota was set up was if you were white and you're in British, then you could come over. They would take an infinite number of people from England. But the further you went down, by the time they got to the darker skin color, the numbers got smaller and smaller. By the time they got to Africa, it was zero. And they didn't remove that zero until like the 1960s or 1950s or something like that. So ultimately, immigration is it is being used to dilute the Black vote. Eventually, the Democrats ain't gonna need you no more. That's why they want illegal immigrants and everything to vote. And the thing about it is, they're not just diluting your power; they're using you to do it. They literally.
Isn't that something? Wow, that's something, ain't it?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, man. They're like, it's like the guy who drives his girlfriend's car to go see a side chick, and then has his girlfriend put the gas in the car so he can go see a side chick. That's literally how dumbed down they've gotten us politically to the point where even like this whole conversation about voting rights and all that stuff, voter ID laws and all that. That's not for Black people. Most Black people can get an ID. Most Black people. Think about it. They telling you to show an ID for that jab, to get into a restaurant. So what makes them think you can't get a driver's license or something? That's for people who are undocumented. I think that's what that door is opening. So I'm not, I'm firmly convinced that within the next few years, we will go from being the second tier racially. We're not even second tier anymore, but we're going to keep sinking down the list because their goal is to, I think, dilute the black vote. Because if you go through parts of like Chicago, and I'm sure where you live in New York, there are jobs that used to be held by black people that are no longer, that are now being held by people from other countries.
Definitely.
That's only going to continue.
Yeah, definitely. As far as our relationship with the immigrants, do you see that getting better? Do you see that getting worse? Do you think the more we stand up for ourselves it's inevitable to get worse? Or what do you think is going to happen in the future?
I think that there are first of all immigrant groups are not the same, right? If somebody's from Kenya, that's not the same as Cuba, right? Or even Latin American immigrants, they're very different, right? And one of the things that helped me understand it, Brother Rich, was that racism's everywhere. White supremacy is all over the world. So you go to South America, the racism's actually worse. You go to Brazil, stuff like that. Like they got millions of black people that they just literally hide from the public. Yeah, so in my thinking, if I see a person that comes from south of the border, they're just not the same. I could talk to a darker skinned Mexican who understands, we both black. This is what we both have to deal with. But then I might talk to a white guy from Mexico who sees the world completely different from me. Right. And one of the things about immigration that's interesting, this is something that's fascinating to me, is I remember I think I was watching the movie Happy, where they were talking about how even if you look in history, you can't find anybody being referenced as a white person before like 1630 or 1640, something like that. People, that whole idea of being white didn't exist. That whiteness was created so they can say, okay, let's all form a team and oppress black people. So what I see when I see immigration is it's white Americans in power saying, okay, let's bring in more white people and let's help them understand the implicit agreement that, look, as long as you join our team, you check that white box on the census, help us strengthen our numbers and our power, and keep black people in their place, then you could just be one of us, right? And that, because America is one of the few places where an Irishman is the same as a German, it's the same as a British person. You go back to Europe, go back 67 years ago, World War II, they were very different. Right. So I think oh, go ahead. What you say, brother?
No, the reason why they're the same now is that for them to get their numbers up. Is that why they're all the same? Yeah.
It's like white and then non-white, right? And I think that whiteness doctrine is designed to maintain power. It's designed to allow them to continuously exploit black people. I mean, America's wealth, all of America's wealth, the vast majority of it was built on the backs of black labor, the exploitation of black people. And if you look around right now, it's all right in front of our face. You look at the prison system, there's billions being made from that. You look at college sports, billions being made from black athletes. You go into corporations. Most of us work for white people. A lot of us rent apartments from white landlords. So we buy products from corporations that where the majority shareholders are white, right? So ultimately, we are we're commodity. We're like a car you drive to work every day, or oil that you put in your car. And it's up to us to decide that we're going to give ourselves back our humanity, or we'll continue to be somebody else's commodity.
Yeah, wow. Let's get to some Q&A. I see the people asking some questions. I want to get to the first question in the super chat. Jules, thank you for the super chat donation. She says, Boyce Watkins, do you think the government is going to forgive $10,000 in student loans?
I think that's a possibility. The student loan crisis is something that actually I believe came into existence because they made so much funding available. It's just like the inflation crisis. See, what happened was that somebody said, "Oh, because back in the day, going to college wasn't that expensive. You could afford it. You get a job and pay your way through school. Now you can't do that." And so I think what happened was somebody said, "Oh, let's do something good. Let's make all these student loans available so people can go to school if they have to." The problem is that based on economic theory, when you provide that much easy money toward a certain type of commodity, that is what they call inelastic. Inelastic means that the demand is always consistent. That means that no matter how high the price is, people still going to do it. So what the universities realized is they were like the neighborhood dope man. Like imagine if I'm the neighborhood dope man and I'm the only place where you can go buy your crack. Well, if I know that the demand has gone up, what am I going to do? increase the price.
Increase price, yeah.
Right. So the universities became like the Pablo Escobars of America in that they just kept increasing. If you look at graphs, you'll see where right after they made all that money available, the price of tuition just started skyrocketing way beyond the rate of inflation. And again, just to help everybody understand, use that dope dealer analogy. Imagine if not only you're the only person in the neighborhood that has the crack and everybody's got to get it from you, but all of the crackheads suddenly got like their paycheck, got a check. All of them got access to $10,000 they can borrow to buy from you. Well, then the price is going to skyrocket, right? So ultimately, the student loan crisis is artificial. That money you owe is not really real money. It is a wealth transfer from the poor to the rich. If you look in a lot of cities where they have big universities, you'll notice that around that university, they're buying up property in Black neighborhoods. So they're using your student loan money to gentrify your communities. There's almost no campus anywhere of a successful university you can find where they're not buying up property left and right all over the place. It's a sad state of affairs. So do I think that they're going to forgive 10,000? They might, but shit, I mean, I don't know. I think it is an illegal debt. It's not even a real debt. It's like you owe me $5,000 for a candy bar because I sold you a candy bar while you were starving, and I said, look, you sign this piece of paper and you owe me $5,000 for a Snickers bar. Snickers bar is not worth $5,000, so a college degree is not worth $250,000 or whatever people owe. So it's an illegal debt. Now, are they going to forgive it? I don't know, but people should also understand Joe Biden was the guy who signed those documents to make it so that you can't even declare bankruptcy on your student loans. He did that. Right. So this guy is not your friend. I'm not saying Trump and all them. I'm not saying they're your friend, but Biden ain't your buddy.
Ooh, Biden has done so much shit, man. Oh boy. Let's get to this next question. Would you encourage this generation to go to college and deal with student loan?
I encourage this generation to do it to do whatever they choose to do under a couple conditions. One, you must have knowledge. In education. Remember, going to school is not the same as getting an education. Education is not the same as knowledge. Knowledge is not the same as wisdom. Wisdom, you got to work for that. It takes time. Knowledge, it could be education. It might be something else. Going to school does not mean you're educated. Like just because you went in the building, that don't make you smart, right? So ultimately, what I would say to a young person is what I said to our 18-year-old. He's 18 now. He's a freshman in college. Is I said, look, if you go to college is not in itself a bad thing. College is not the devil. The devil is when you take on more debt than is justified by what you're receiving in exchange for that debt. So if you go to college and the cost is reasonable and you have a debt level that can be taken down or paid off with the amount of money you're going to make with that degree you're getting, that makes perfect sense. If I go to school and I borrow $80,000 to become a dentist and I end up making $200,000 a year, and that's not a problem. That's a good move. In business, we call that a positive net present value investment. That's a good investment. But if I go borrow $200,000 to get a degree in English literature, where I'm gonna make $50,000 and sit on $200,000 in debt, that was a bad decision. So debt is not a bad thing. Debt can be a very good thing. It's like medication or fire. Fire can be great if you're cold and you need something to cook your food, but it can be terrible if you burn your house down. So I would encourage everybody to just remember that. Second thing I remember is every Black person in America should have some understanding of what it means to start their own business. I just believe that. I believe you have to have a plan B. Your plan A, B, C, and C cannot be the white man's going to take care of me for the rest of my life. Because I think at that point you are signing up for slavery. So every Black child in America, in my view, should be trained on how to start a business by the age of 12. They should also own shares of stock on the day that they're born. If you love your children, buy them shares of stock, buy it every week, and do that every day until they are 25 or 30 years old. And then that way you hand your child a couple $100,000 because that's what your money's grown into by that time. And then they don't have financial problems anymore as long as they're responsible. 3, every child should measure his economic success on ownership, not on income. So forget, bragging about how you got a fancy job making good money. Income is the appetizer. The main course is ownership and wealth. Measure yourself by how much you actually own and control. And so that means, for example, with real estate, If I'm renting from somebody, that's going to be temporary. At some point, I'm going to own some real estate so that I can get on the wealthy side of the fence and get the benefits that wealthy people receive. You do those basic things, your children are going to be okay. They're not going to be complaining about, how hard it is to be black. I mean, if they are, it'll be over something else. It won't be over money.
We're gonna take a few more questions. Family, give me some questions in the chat. But before we do that, Dr. Boyce, how do you is cryptocurrency really going to be the next big thing in your opinion? What's your thoughts on cryptocurrency?
Yeah. I don't think it makes any sense to ignore crypto. The crypto market is real. People are really committed to it. What makes it real, Brother Rich, is that people believe in it. There are people that that will ride with Bitcoin until they die. Programmers and stuff that are on the blockchain. It's like it means more than just the money. It's not just about the money for them. So I think, and also if you just study blockchain technology, it's so brilliant. It's so next level. So many great things are being built on the blockchains with Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything else. The problem with crypto is you got to be real careful though, because there's a lot of whenever there's a lot of investor enthusiasm, that's when scams start to emerge. That's when people start selling stuff that's garbage and everything else. And so, from what I have observed, the most solid investments that I've made in crypto have been things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and then Polygon. I think a lot of the NFT marketplace and some of the metaverse stuff is on the Polygon network and a couple others. I wouldn't dig into things like Dogecoin and Shiba Inu too much. I mean, if you want to do it for gambling purposes, like because you think it's going to go up, fine, gamble. It's fun. It's up to you. It's your right to do that. Nothing wrong with that. But don't consider that to be your solid, sturdy investment. Like, don't be surprised if you lose everything with those investments. But the rest of crypto, I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. They're building a whole metaverse on crypto and everything else, and NFTs and all that's out there now. Those are what do they call it? Rabbits you let out of the hat or whatever you call it. They've let it out of the Pandora's box. It ain't going back in.
Indeed. Trina Red wants to know, what do you think most young men rather get in business, online, even trade school versus colleges?
Because some black men are just not built for slavery. It's just you just some guys are just wired to want to be the boss. They're not. I don't know what my disposition is exactly, but I know I never liked anybody telling me what to do, even my mama. I like being my own man. I got, when I was 16, man, I got my late grandmother, Felicia. We named our black business school Panther after my grandmother. So our Panther's name is Felicia. That's how I keep her with me everywhere I go. Dope. So she's in the room. I already know it. Dope. And but when I was 16, man, she got me a moped, and I was so happy to get that moped. And I was happy to get it because I didn't have to wait for a ride anymore. You know that feeling with, like, you get done with basketball practice or football practice, and you got to wait for your mama to pick you up, and she get there late, and you sitting there, after everybody's gone and you all embarrassed and stuff. I hated that, or I hated asking people for a ride. So when I got that moped, I rode that moped everywhere. Even when I would get on the highway, they could only go 35 miles an hour. So I'd be on the highway where the speed limit was 45. So I would have a line of cars. I'd be cutting traffic. A whole line of cars would be behind me. But I was so proud to have my own transportation. So it didn't have to be anything fancy. What made it special was that it was mine, and that I got to decide when I was going to come and go, period. And I think that's some people have that type of spirit in them. Some people have that energy where they just say, you know what? I don't have to make all the money in the world. I just want to have something in the world that's mine. And I think a lot of black men feel this way, because remember, America is a country where the black man, being a full grown man, is a real threat to white supremacy. That's why the types of black men they tend to promote on TV and mainstream tend to fit minstrel show categories, right? It's either some thugged out rapper, with big gold diamonds in his mouth, like smiling like a big minstrel show, or it's a comedian, the clown, because a clown will never be the king. A clown does not threaten the king, right? You're there for the king's entertainment and enjoyment, or maybe an athlete, right? But the idea of a black man just being a normal, solid, heterosexual male who is competing like everybody else, that's not something America is built for. There is no space for you. If you are a straight black man who has both of your testicles attached to your body, corporate America is not built for you. Even little things like the fact that if you go in that company and there's a woman that's attracted to you and you start sleeping with that woman, they will treat you damn near like you a rapist, like you did something bad because because you were the manager and all the women think that you're attractive because you're powerful and you got the money. So you sleep with one of them. Next thing you know, they're talking to you like you really committed a crime. This is happening. So if I had a son, I would not advise my son to go into corporate America, or if I did, I would say, son, always make sure you have a plan B in case that man takes that away from you, because no man worth his weight in salt or anything is ever going to be fully dependent on another man to survive. Like, I just don't believe that. I don't believe the black man can ever be a real man if he's dependent on the white man to create pathways and opportunities. How the hell am I going to tell my woman I'm really a man when I'm like, well, but I got to go ask the other man if I got permission to be the man? No, you don't do that. That's not, because she's going to naturally say, well, why am I sleeping with you? I should be sleeping with him. I need to cut out the middleman and go to where the real power base is. So I just encourage everybody to understand that when you talk about things like ownership and control, it's bigger than money. It's bigger than money. It's power. It's the ability to shape your own destiny. It's not a matter of having enough power to hurt other people or to take over other people's lives, but just enough power to say, this is the space that I control. This is my sovereign space. And that's very important for black people to have.
Being young, one thing I noticed that I didn't like, and I said I definitely can't just have a regular 9 to 5, is I didn't like the fact that I noticed brothers, when they went into work, they had to take the bass out of their voice. Something as natural as the way you talk, you have to alter that, and you have to be a little more high pitched just to seem a little less threatening. And I noticed it, and I was like, damn, you can't even talk natural. I'm not saying you don't have to talk with slang or anything like that, but just because you have a little more bass in your voice, that may be intimidating. So I noticed brothers would take that out, and I'm like, oh man, I can't live like that. It seemed so crazy to me, Doc.
Yeah, well, you got to remember that even people don't talk about how they really feel anymore because it's not always politically correct. Like, white people are not allowed to tell you what they really think about your black ass. Like, they can't be honest with you anymore. I really wish they could be. I'm like, lay it out on the table, like, stop it, But it's not politically correct for them to do that. So what you want to do is, I found there's a lot of value in just studying human nature or studying even animals. How does I watched this giraffe one time, right? And he was kind of an OG. He had like a lot of territory. That's how giraffes get all the sex, is when they have a big territory they control. The women want to sleep with them because they want to be with the guy that's got the most resources, right? So this guy is sitting there. And now the thing is, I think they only mate like once a year or something. So he's waiting for the women to come, because I guess they come 2 at a time, and he's looking, and then he sees the women coming. He's all excited or whatever, and then he sees another like young guy like walking with the women, right? And he's like, well, what is this? His neck is sticking out. He's like, what's going on? And the young guy is coming to basically say, these are my women now. Like, you can't have them anymore. So of course they end up fighting. Right? Because one is a threat to the other. I learn a lot from watching that, because that tells me how some other men are going to feel about you when you're letting your light shine, or you're being the best man you can be. There are going to be people that are naturally going to be uncomfortable with that or intimidated by that. And I believe personally that the black man, particularly the black man in America, is almost like a superhero. Or in the eyes of some, maybe a super villain. And I say that because think about it, right? What other group of people in the history of this world has survived the slave dungeons, the Middle Passage, 250 years of the worst slavery known to all mankind, and then slave breeding farms where they took the biggest, strongest slaves and bred them together and created like super slaves, right? And then the crack era, Jim Crow, all of that, and we're still here. Mass incarcerated, we survive all of that. We have something special that other men can't compete with. So you got this inferior man who's got all this wealth and power, and then you've got that big, strong black man with the muscles who who can run 4.4 in the 40-yard dash, and who's got the bass in his voice, and all the women are picking up on this masculinity. He's going to be threatened by that. That's why. if you look at most studies, the only person who makes the same amount of money in corporate America as the white male is the gay black man. The gay black man.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, so he has space
Wow.
for two types of people. He has space for the women, because every heterosexual man wants the women around. Like, that's nice, right? And he also has space for the gay black man. He ain't got space for the heterosexual male, because men, unfortunately, in many cases, have a natural competition with one another, right? So ultimately, my belief is that if you have a son, if you want your son to have safety and sanity, make sure he knows how to start his own business. Because when he gets in that trap and he's going to work every day, he's just being, he's getting demoted and don't even know why, or they're blocking him out of certain opportunities, passing him over for promotions. That'll piss him off and drive him crazy. And when you start going crazy and you're stressed out and you can't do anything about it, you start committing suicide. Basically, you start drinking a lot and taking drugs, doing self-destructive things. You start getting depressed because you can't actually fight back. So when you give your son the skills to fight back, where he says, you know what, F all of y'all, I'm starting my own business now. If that allows him access to his to really fulfill his own destiny, really to become the man that he's meant to be. Some of us are not meant to sit under the shadow of inferior people. And I'm not saying all white people are inferior or nothing like that. I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying that some of our black men are just almost godlike in there. But think about somebody like Dr. Myron Rolle. You know Myron Rolle? You heard his name?
Yeah.
Look at this guy. I mean, he's an All-American at Florida State. He played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think he was All-Pro in the NFL.
Yeah.
And he's a surgeon who went to Oxford and Harvard. So he's stronger than you. He's smarter than you. He's got all these things that you don't have. So men like that are not meant to be subordinate. They're meant to lead something, right? And so our men have to have spaces where we can lead. And the best way to lead is not to try to fit into somebody else's space. Sometimes the best way to lead is to get your own space. Like even with my stepfather, when we got to a point where I was a man and he was a man, we couldn't both be men under the same roof. I had to go find my own roof.
Right.
There you go. It's that simple.
It's powerful, brother. Let's get two more questions before we get out of here. We have Tampa Bong. Tampa Bong says, how can the Black community better utilize global mechanisms like manufacturing in China and back off in the Philippines?
Well, there are a lot of ways to outsource. I know people who use things like Alibaba and stuff like that to source products from China. Things like that. If they're selling products, or also if you go to things like Upwork and Fiverr and stuff like that, you'll find people in the Philippines that they can work for you. I had a lady from the Philippines who worked for me for years and did a really good job. And that's a good way. Like if you start a business and you don't have all the money that you'd like to have, if you hire people offshore, it is cheaper to get things done, and the English is good. And like India has some of the best engineers and programmers that you can imagine. So I think that might be a good way to go there, without necessarily having to travel there or anything like that. So that's the answer to that. But I would look at things like Fiverr and Upwork and places like that, and then you can find good talent there. They even have whole companies where all they do is they package together people in other countries that can come and work for you if that's something that you need.
All right. When picking stocks for a company, what are the best parameters for choosing a company to invest in?
The best way to choose a company to invest in, that goes back to what I was thinking about earlier when you asked me about the complications of investing. Let me just tell you the two most important rules of investing. Y'all ready? Write this down.
Yes.
The two most important things to remember when it comes to investing are one, try to hold the stocks that you buy. Don't do a lot of flipping and selling constantly back and forth every other day. That's what they call market timing. And the research says market timing does not work. I know a lot of people do it, and I know a lot of people are going to say I'm wrong, but I've read 1,000 research papers on it. I wrote research papers on this type of stuff. Market timing does not work, because what it'll do is it'll cause you to miss out on a lot of big gains, right? So if you want to save yourself a lot of stress, just buy some stuff and just hold it. Just leave it there. Don't mess with it. Some families own shares of a company for an entire generation, right? You don't have to have a day where you sell. The second rule of investing is don't put all your eggs in one basket. So there should never be like one stock or one investment that's going to be the one that's going to change everything for you. There is no such thing. There is no one company you can invest in that's going to change it all. In fact, if you put it all in one company, you're asking for trouble, because if that company goes bankrupt, you lose everything. So what you do is you spread your money out. So if you buy individual stocks, you should own at least about maybe 20 or 25 different companies. They should be solid, relatively solid companies, not just a bunch of high risk companies. You could throw a couple of risky companies in there, but most of them should be like S&P 500 companies. Or a good way to do it without spreading your money out is to buy like an index fund that invests in the S&P 500 on your Robinhood app. It's called a Spider Fund, SPDR. SPDR is the ticker symbol. Let me just summarize it like this: if you had let's say you had a child right now, and you said, I want my child to be successful, I want my child to be wealthy. Give me a yes in the chat if you want that for your kids. All right, so you want your child to be wealthy, you want them to be successful. Because I want everybody to really hear this, because this is so important. Then here's what you can do, right? I created something I call the $5 a day plan, where literally if you take the equivalent of $5 a day, which is $35 a week, and you set it to automatically invest in like the S&P 500 Spider Fund, which is an ETF that gives you a piece of all the biggest companies in America. If you do that consistently every week until your child is 25 or 30 years old, your child would have hundreds of thousands of dollars liquid. So think about how differently a lot of our lives would have been if our parents were able to hand us over a couple $100,000 liquid at 25 years old. That would have changed everything for me. That means no student loans. That means I'm buying a house at 25, 26 years old. That means I can start a business whenever I want to. A lot of people can't even come up with $1,000 in the case of an emergency. I'm not making fun of people in that situation, but the thing is, it doesn't have to be that way. Right? It just takes some planning. The number one variable in investing is time. So if you're doing it for a longer period of time, like your kids have all the time in the world. So if you start investing for them when they're little, when they're 0 years old, then by the time they're in their 20s, they literally would have a couple $100,000 available. You just have to be consistent with it, and don't go buying and selling. Just buy it each week and just own it. Just leave it there. Just hold it, and that's it.
Let's get to one more question, Boyce. Right here. Should we be positioning ourselves to do business in Africa?
Yes, absolutely. We should be learning as much as we can about Africa. In fact, for the next generation, here's the deal, right? Any of us who are over the age of 35, it's going to be difficult to really establish foundational large-scale investments in Africa before we're done. But what we can do is make sure that we reclaim the educational process for our kids, to make sure that, just as fundamental training, all of our children are well aware of all the countries in Africa and how many people are there. If you look at how many countries there are in Africa that have over, say, 20, 30 million people that look just like you, that would love to do business with you. And if you think about the fact that most of those countries, we learn nothing about that in school, that's downright criminal. I mean, that's downright, they literally like wiped half the earth off the slate and act like it didn't exist. So now a lot of our people don't have a lot of comfort with Africa. They don't know what to do. They don't know who to talk to. They're afraid of the Africans. I don't want to be like, and that's changing. But I think in general, Africa, that's your gold mine. Africa is still the richest continent on the planet. The problem is that most of that wealth is going into the hands of Chinese people now. The Chinese are seeing that. The Chinese are there establishing a foothold in Africa, and every imaginable 100-year leases and massive deals, and that's kind of the tradition of Africa. But Africa is the richest continent on earth for a lot of reasons. A couple of reasons at the top of the list are: one, they have the youngest population on the planet. So Africa in the next century is gonna be what India and China were in the last century. They have the youngest population. They have all kinds of resources. I mean, you name the resource, Africa's got it, right? So Africa's got the wealth, and they have people there that would love to connect and do business with us. And I'm participating with some people, with some groups that are doing some things in Africa. And I really think it's our job in this generation. I'm a little bit older than you, so I'll say in my generation, our job is really to begin to lay the infrastructure to make it easier for those in later generations to just have direct trade channels with Africa, right? And so that's what we're doing in terms of making those trips. I'm gonna go to Africa again this year since the pandemic's over. I look forward to that because I think that that's really what the future should entail.
You like what Akon's doing over there? What you think about what he's doing?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I don't know all the details. Like I see stuff every now and then, like memes and stuff. It looks like he's doing some pretty big stuff. So, once it's all done, I look forward to seeing it. I mean, I'll support any way that I can. It looks like, I mean, who knew Akon had that kind of power? I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Man, well, I appreciate you coming on, Dr. Watkins. Tell the people how they could contact you, your website for your school, and anything else, any other information.
Yeah, it's all really easy. You can just go to boycewatkins.com. If you go to boycewatkins.com, everything's there, social media, the Black Business School, all that stuff. And I'd love to talk to anybody in here. And it's an honor to come on your platform, man. I tell you, I remember, I know I work a lot with Vicky Dillard, and I know Vicky came through, and you have Griff that comes by, and my wife is sitting here listening, and she's a big fan of yours, man. And so we have a lot of respect for you, man. And I'm honored that you had me onto your channel.
Hey, I'm gonna keep in mind what you said about, because my son is 3 years old now. So I'm gonna keep in mind what you said about putting $5 away. You said every day.
Yeah.
Good.
Now, $5 a day that's the minimum layout, because I did it that way because I had a lot of people that would argue me into the ground about, though Black people can't afford to invest, they can't afford to invest. I said, well, Black people can afford Popeye's chicken. Well, how much is a Popeye's chicken value meal? It's like $7, whatever. So I said, okay, let's do $5 a day. Let's see what happens. So you do $5 a day. Let's say 35 a week, and you automatically put it into an S&P 500 Spider Index fund, and you don't touch it. You don't sell. Well, based on history, based on the last 100 years of investment returns, after 10 years, you'd have about $29,000. After 20 years, you'd have $102,000. After 30 years, you have almost $250,000. After 40 years, you got $750,000. That is the bare minimum. That's $5 a day. But most of us can afford more than $5 a day. Let's say you did $10 a day. Well, all the numbers double. You do $20 a day, then the numbers quadruple. So instead of talking about, $100,000 in 20 years, you're talking about, $400,000, right? And the thing is, I want people to let go of these myths out here that say that if you are born poor, you have to stay poor. There is no rule saying you have to stay poor unless you let them convince you to stay poor up here. If you just say, okay, I'm supposed to be poor, I'm supposed to be in poverty, then that's what you're going to get. But I don't think you have to do that. I think you deserve better than that. All of us do. It's just a matter of knowing the rules of the game. That's all.
Some solid business advice from Dr. Boyce Watkins, man. Once again, I appreciate you coming on here. I look forward to having you on sometime in the near future. Keep doing what you're doing out there, brother. Shout out to Vicky Dillard. Shout out to your wife, and shout out to everybody else who's holding it down on the Black economic platforms out there. Brother Rich Boyce Watkins, we getting out of here, family. Peace.
Peace.
All right.